Hello, friends. We're back again to hear the continuing story of the Tale of Despereaux. Here we go. Chapter 7, A Mouse in Love. And what was our own favorite member of the mouse community doing while the sound of the mouse council drum echoed through the walls of the castle? Readers, I must resort to Furlong. He had not seen the worst of it. Despereaux sat with the princess and the king and listened to song after song. At one point, gently, oh so gently, the pea picked up the mouse in her hand. She cupped him in her palm and scratched his oversized ears. "You have lovely ears," the pea said to him. "They are like small pieces of velvet." Despereaux thought he might faint with pleasure of someone referring to his ears as small and lovely. He laid his wrist, steadying himself, and he felt the princess's pulse, the pounding of her heart, and his own heart immediately took up the rhythm of hers. "Papa," said the pea when music was over, "I'm going to keep this mouse. We are going to be great friends." The king looked down at Despereaux cupped in his daughter's hands. He narrowed his eyes. "A mouse? A rodent?" "What?" said P. "Put it down," the king commanded. "No," said the P, who was a person not at all used to being told what to do. I mean, why should I?" "Because I told you." "But why?" the P protested. "Because it is a mouse." "I know, I'm the one who told you he was a mouse." "I wasn't thinking," said the king. "Thinking of what?" "Your mother, the queen." "My mother?" the P said sadly. "Mice are rodents," said the king, and he adjusted his crown. "They are related to rats. You know how we feel about rats. You know of our own dark history with rats." The P shuddered. "But Papa, he is not a rat, he is a mouse. There's a difference." "Royalty," said the king, "has many responsibilities, and one of them is not becoming involved personally with even a distant relative of one's enemy. Put him down, P." The princess put Despereaux down. "Good girl," said the king, and then he looked at Despereaux. "Scat," he said. Despereaux, however, did not scat. He sat up and stared at the princess. The king stomped his foot. "Scat!" he shouted. "Papa," said the princess, "please don't be mean to him." And she began to weep. Despereaux, seeing her tears, broke the last of the great ancient rules of mice. He spoke to a human. "Please," said Despereaux, "don't cry." He held out his handkerchief to the princess. P sniffled and leaned down close to him. "Do not speak to her," the king thundered. Despereaux, dropping his handkerchief, backed away from the king. "Rodents do not speak to princesses. We will not have this becoming a topsy-turvy, wrong-headed world. There are rules. Scat, get lost before my common sense returns, and I have you killed." The king stomped his foot again. Despereaux found it alarming to have such a great, large foot brought down with so much force and anger so close to his own small little head. He ran towards the hole in the wall, but he turned before he entered it, and he turned and shouted to the princess, "My name is Despereaux." "Despereaux?" she shouted back. "I honor you." "I honor you," was what the knight said to the fair maiden in the story that Despereaux read every day in the library. Despereaux had muttered the phrase to himself often, but he had never before this evening had occurred to use it when speaking to somebody else. "Get out of here!" shouted the king, stomping his foot harder and harder and still harder. It seemed as if the whole castle, the whole world was shaking. "Rodents know nothing of honor." Despereaux, ran into the hole, and from there he looked out at the princess. She had picked up his handkerchief and was looking at him directly, right into his soul. Despereaux, he said. He saw his name on her lips. I honor you, whispered Despereaux. I honor you. And he put his paw over his heart. He bowed so low that his whiskers touched the floor. And he was, alas, a mouse deeply in love. Chapter 8. Ooh, to the rats. The Mouse Council, 13 honored mice and one most very honored head mouse, heeded the call of Leicester's drum and gathered in a small secret hole off of King Philip's throne room. The 14 mice sat across a piece of wood balanced on spools of thread and listened in horror while Despereaux's father relayed the story of what Furlong had seen. At the foot of a king, said Leicester. Her finger right on top of his head, said Leicester. He was looking up at her, and it was not in fear. The Mouse Council members listened with their mouths open. They listened with their whiskers drooping and their ears flat against their head. They listened with dismay and outrage and fear. When Leicester finished, there was a silence. Deep. Something, intoned the most very honored head mouse, is wrong with your son. He is not well. This goes beyond his fevers, beyond his large ears, and lack of growth. He is deeply disturbed. His behaviors endanger us all. Humans cannot be trusted. We know this to be an indisputable fact. A mouse who consorts with humans, a mouse who sits right at the foot of a man, a mouse who would allow a human to touch him. Here the entire Mouse Council indulged in a collective shiver of disgust. Cannot be trusted. This is the way of the world, our world. Fellow mice, it is my most hope that Despereaux has not yet spoken to this human. But obviously we cannot assume nothing. This is a time to act and not wonder. Leicester nodded his head in agreement. 12 other members of the Mouse Council nodded immediately. Members of the council, I will ask you all now to vote. Those in favor of Despereaux being sent to the dungeon say aye. There was a sad chorus of ayes, aye, aye, aye. Those opposed say nay. Silence reigned in the room. The only noise came from Leicester. He was crying. The 13 mice, ashamed for Leicester, looked away. Readers, can you imagine your own father not voting against your being sent to the dungeon full of rats? Can you imagine him not saying one word in your defense? Despereaux's father wept, and the most very honored head mouse beat his paw against the table again and said, Despereaux Tilling will appear before the Mouse Council. He will hear of his sins. He will be given a chance to deny them. If he does not deny them, he will be allowed to renounce them so that he may go to the dungeon with a pure heart. Despereaux Tilling is hereby called to sit with the Mouse Council. At last, Leicester had the decency to weep at the act of his own perfidy. Readers, do you know what the word perfidy means? I have a feeling you might, based on this little scene that has just unfolded here. But you should look up the word in your dictionaries, just to be sure. Chapter 9, The Right Question. The Mouse Council sent Furlong to collect Despereaux, and Furlong found his brother in the library, standing on top of a great book open book with his tail wrapped tightly around his feet and his small body shivering. Despereaux was reading a story out loud to himself. He was reading from the beginning so that he could get to the end, where the reader was assured that the king and the fair maiden lived happily ever after. Despereaux wanted to read those words, happily ever after. He needed to say them out loud. He needed some reassurance that his feelings that he had for the Princess P, this love, would come to a good end. And so he was reading the story as if it were a spell, and the words of it spoke aloud, could really make the magic happen. See here, Furlong said aloud to himself. He looked at his brother and then looked away. This is just the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is exactly the kind of thing. What is he doing here, for cripe's sake? He's not eating the paper. He's talking to the paper. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. Hey, he said to Despereaux. Despereaux kept reading. Hey, shouted Furlong. Despereaux, the Mouse Council wants you. Pardon? Said Despereaux. He looked up from his book. The Mouse Council has called you to sit with them. Me? Said Despereaux. You. I'm busy right now, said Despereaux, and he bent his head again down to the open book. Furlong sighed. Geez, he said, cripes! Nothing makes sense to this guy. Nothing. I was right to turn him in. He's sick. Furlong crawled up the chair leg and then hopped onto the book. He sat next to Despereaux. He tapped him on the head once, twice. Hey, he said, the Mouse Council isn't asking. They're telling. They're commanding. You have to come with me right now. Despereaux turned to Furlong. Do you know what love is? He said. Huh? Love. Furlong shook his head. You're asking the wrong question. The question you should be asking is, why is the Mouse Council wanting to see me? There is someone who loves me, said Despereaux, and I love her, and that's the only thing that matters to me. Somebody who loves you? Somebody who loves you? What difference does it make? What matters is that you're in a lot of trouble with the Mouse Council. Her name, said Despereaux, is P. What? The person who loves me, her name is P. Oh, cripe, said Furlong. You're missing the whole point of everything here. You're missing the point of being a mouse. You're missing the point of being called to sit with the Mouse Council. You've got to come with me. It's the law. You've been called. Despereaux sighed. He reached out and touched the words fair maiden in the book. He traced them with one paw, and then he put his paw to his mouth. Cripes, said Furlong. You are making a fool of yourself. Let's go. I honor you, Despereaux whispered. I honor you. And then, readers, he followed Furlong over the book and down the chair leg and across the library floor to the awaiting Mouse Council. He allowed his brother to lead him to his fate.